Hey everyone, it's Triple Mango Threat, and today I have with me Mod Anon MTG, also known as Dan. It's so great to have you.
Very excited to be here today. Thank you so much for having me.
So, on Twitter, I saw that you posted about a budget Power 9, and I really wanted to talk about that today.
Yeah, I would love to. I love budget EDH. I've been getting really into it over the past year or so, and yeah, I'd love to talk about it.
So, on the screen right now, I'll show off the 9 cards that you picked, so please explain to me why you chose these cards. I would love to know your reasoning.
So for the Power Nine, I was sort of thinking of it as a sort of mixture of what the literal Power Nine is, in that it is the most powerful 9 cards that we have access to in Magic, and sort of that mixed with what are my personal favorite, like I wouldn't leave home without them sort of cards in my own personal Power Nine. So if you're looking at the screen, you can see that it is entirely skewed towards the Bant color pie, which is again like my personal flavor of where I like to be in my casual EDH builds. But as far as like the most powerful ones go, Soul Ring, as far as I'm concerned, is the power 10 in real life. Like I think it is very likely the 10th most powerful, or maybe like somewhere in the top 15 most powerful cards in Magic. And the fact that it is only about $1 and change, and it is still so extremely powerful, that is my number one pick for sure, no questions asked. I would never build a deck without it. That is just, I'm so happy that we get to play Soul Ring in EDH that I never would miss an opportunity to do so.
Yeah, you get to gain 1 mana for 1. Yeah, it's excellent.
Yes, it's mana advantage, it's a card advantage if you think about it in terms of like your opponent makes a land drop and passes, I make a land drop and cast a soul ring. I've essentially made 3 land drops in 1 turn. It's a really hard amount of advantage to come back from if you are not on the soul ring train.
Exactly, yeah, and it makes you a threat as well, typically, I would say.
I think justifiably so. But I think Soul Ring does a great job of bridging the gap between logically becoming the opponent of the table and also having the power to sort of back it up if you're able to ramp into your 4 drops on turn 2, 5, and 6 drops on your next appropriate turns. It's a ton of power that can be definitely very difficult to overcome.
Yeah, I love to play this whenever I have a 4 CMC commander, like, for example, Marin, you can cast her on turn 2 with this.
Yeah,
Or
those
actually, no,
sort of
turn
tempo advantages are
3?
really
No, it is turn 2.
yeah, turn 1 land drop with Soul Ring into turn 2.
Right.
Yeah, that sort of tempo advantage on your half of the board is super, super valuable. So in that same train of thought, that is exactly why I also have Arcane Signet and Felwar Stone on here, because it is
Mhm.
certainly the best luck that you can possibly ever have to go Soul Ring into an Arcane Signet or Felwar Stone. But other than that, I think that they are just like generally really fantastic spells. They are aggressively costed for what they do. They do a great thing, unlike casting a mana dork or a traditional signet that doesn't tap for mana when it comes out. Being able to transition mana quickly into other things is extremely valuable. So I think for that reason, Arcane Signet and Valor Stone are both just shoe-ins for being really great spells.
Absolutely, and something else I noticed, you'll mention the next few cards, 5 out of your 9 are ramp spells.
Yes, I think that ramping in the early game is, in my opinion, one of the most important parts of getting your engines online and your pieces together. It really, I guess the way I would think about it is that it really opens up your options for what you can do on any subsequent turns if you spent the first two, like 2 to 3 turns ramping. If I draw pretty much any spell off the top, if I have played any of the like first 5 spells on this list, it makes it a lot easier to cast them. It leaves my options open to transitioning into casting more spells on earlier turns, which is also extremely powerful. So I definitely put more value in my ability to cast spells than what the specific spells are, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Do you think ramping is more powerful than card draw? It's not really related, but I would like to know your thoughts on that.
That's a great question. I think in EDH, it makes it a hard question to answer, I think, because our priorities are so skewed in terms of like in comparison to other formats. Where if we were talking about a 1v1 format, I think those are basically always decided on who has more card advantage. So I think it's pretty easy to say putting cards in my hand is always better. I'm a big fan of blue decks and Legacy that get to play Brainstorm and Ponder for those sorts of reasons. Just being able to keep your hand stocked and being able to change the contents of your hand is usually very good. But in EDH, where you have three opponents and you have a lot more time to do things, I'm not quite sure because you do need spells, obviously, to cast with your mana ramp. But again, your deck is full of them. You get to draw a card every turn. So I think I would lean a little bit more towards ramp being more important than card draw.
For EDH, how many ramp cards, or do you have like a number like, oh, I need 15 ramp cards to be satisfied with this deck, or do you have decks like that?
I don't know that I have a specific number in mind, but if I was to guesstimate right now, if I were to look at my average EDH deck and see how many like 1 to 3 mana ramp spells it has, I would guess somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 18.
Okay, interesting. Well, I was really curious about that, but please continue on your Power 9 list.
Yes, absolutely. So to speak to some more ramp, the next one on the list is rampant growth. I guess we can just do the green ones together. Rampant growth and wild growth, both extremely powerful cards. Rampant growth, I like. I refer to my decks as having many rampant growths because rampant growth I think is just the perfect spell. Again, to compare to what I said to Arcane Signet, aggressively costed for what it does. Lands are very hard to mess with once they're on the battlefield. It is one of the really great advantages to playing green in EDH. And the same sort of goes for wild growth, actually, with lands being sort of taboo to mess with a lot of the time. Wild growth is, I guess I would say, a worse imitation of Soul Ring almost. It costs we'll say like twice as much mana in that if you were to turn one, play a forest and put a wild growth on it, you cannot tap it for 2 mana on that first turn, but in your subsequent turns you have what is almost always a better Soul Ring.
Hmm. Right. And I totally agree. Like, whenever there's a player messing with lands and there wasn't like a before conversation about that, rule zero conversation, that can be a little frustrating. So I totally agree on that. I think we could maybe see more wild growths, like at least for budget purposes. That'd be really sweet.
It's something that I think a lot of people probably overlook because it is not for lack of a better term, a very sexy spell. It is like
Yeah.
it's very plain, it's very unassuming. But when I started getting into budget EDH, a friend of mine, Timmy T1000, who runs a budget CEDH database where they keep track of budget CEDH decks that you can build. I think the prices are between $100 and $500 for the decks. He got in my ear immediately, and he was telling me that Wild Growth and Fertile Ground are two of the best budget things that he sees in all of the budget green decks on the budget CEDH decklist database. And I was immediately like, oh, that makes tons of sense. It fixes your mana, it helps you ramp quickly and aggressively. And again, like if you're thinking about stuff that blows up basics, it's pretty few and far between. Like Ghost Quarter is one of the most common things I can think of, but personally, I hardly ever see a Ghost Quarter, so I'm not super scared of it. And also, if you got the Ghost Quarter, you earned it. You definitely get to take away my wild growth. I won't argue it.
Cool. All right. What's our next card?
So next up, I'll just go ahead and lump the blue spells together: Counterspell and Etherize. So I guess there's also a sort of theme on this list of cards that were released in alpha. There's a lot of them. Counterspell, I think, matches all of the criteria of the other things I've been talking about so far. Aggressively costed, does a really great thing, and Counterspell in particular is extremely flexible. Where I think I'm primarily a CEDH player, so I think a lot in terms of the way I'm using spells defensively versus aggressively. And I tend to lean towards a more aggressive stance in my deck building, but I really love spells like Counterspell that play both sides of that, where Counterspell will keep you from dying and also make sure that you can kill everyone else.
So I play a more casual commander. So if we have time for my list, you'll see that my mana cost, I'm actually comparing ours right now. Mine is in like the 4 to 6 range, where yours is like 1 to 4, which is very interesting.
Mhm. I'm very interested to hear what your picks are.
Okay, what do you got next?
The other blue spell that we got is Etherize. So Etherize, 3 and a blue, instant speed, return all attacking creatures to their own hands. This is one that I think probably shows off my personal playing styles more than anything else. Because I'm a very dirtly player. I love to sit around and not attack people and just draw cards, and people hate that. They always want to kill me. I don't understand why. So Etherize is something that's very much in the list of like I would never leave home without it because I know people love to punch me, and I simply want to draw more, like 5 or 6 more cards before I get killed every single game. I think that is my usual stance.
Yeah, so I call it Aetherized, so you have to forgive me for that. Uh, but no, that is a super sweet card, especially whenever maybe there's a white player who had like 21 ones just coming at me, and like a Darien deck, for example, and I
Mhm.
can just play a 4 mana spell, take care of that. I love that card.
It's also one where, I really don't mind taking my budget decks into any meta of casual EDH. Like, if people wanna play their really strong decks against me, I really don't mind because I do enjoy playing interaction slots in my deck. So, like, if people got big problems, I can do my best to take care of them. I know I've at least got one answer in the deck. And Aetherize is a great, like, release valve for just, like, people who are playing decks that are way stronger than yours and like, "Oh, I'll never be able to eat like 16 Eldrazi hits, so I am
Yeah,
really glad that I have this Aetherize.
yeah, it is a really sweet card. So, what's your next pick?
Next up, I guess, really fits in also with my dirtly nature, and it's Swords to Plowshares. Swords to Plowshares is, again, from Alpha, one of the best removal spells. Probably, I will go ahead and claim, just for the sake of drama, that Swords to Plowshares is the best removal spell ever printed in Magic the Gathering. Um, It does a lot. You already have 40 life in EDH, so I'm really not concerned with giving someone like 5 or 6 more of it. Usually not a make or break on the game. I feel like people tend to like swing at you for 100 damage or like do some sort of combo or something like that that doesn't necessarily need damage to go through. So Swords to Plowshares, I feel like has very little downside and does so much for just a single mana.
Yeah, that and Path to Exile are excellent, but Path to Exile, I think, is a little more expensive than Source of Plowshares right now.
Only a little bit though, because it actually just got reprinted in the Lord of the Rings pre-con, so I started slotting into my budget decks now because it's just a little bit over $1, which like is a lot because I'm thinking like Soul Ring is about $1.15.
Mhm.
Most TCG player sellers. So for something to be $1 and change, it's got to be like almost as powerful as Soul Ring in my mind. But Path to Exile is just about there, I think.
Yeah. And what is your last budget Power 9 card?
So yes, the last card we got here is, again, I think this is another like very me pick. Odric Lunarch Marshal. This is the Odric that at the beginning of each combat gives all of your creatures basically the most like common keywords that are in all core sets: flying, vigilance, death touch, a bunch of other stuff. So again, I'm really dirtly. I like to play a lot of value creatures. I like to play creatures that do a thing, but don't really exist to attack, they exist to block more often than not. So Odric is really good at using the random keywords like flying and things like that to make your more dirtly creatures a little bit more aggressive, and also sort of just make your things less mess withable. If you have anything with death touch, giving your team death touch and flying or first strike or something like that during each combat is an extremely powerful thing. It'll save you a ton of life over the course of the game. For 4 mana, like, I think about a lot of cards in terms of like what effect they have had over the course of a game. If I'm playing against a burn player 1v1 and they use a lightning bolt on my creature instead of my face, I am thinking, well, I got my opponent. I whatever creature I spent, if I spent 1 mana on this creature gained me 3 life. I spent 1 mana to gain 3 life. If you think about Odric like that, it's 4 mana to gain like maybe 20 or 30 life over a course of a game.
So, yes, I agree Odric is, like, an excellent budget commander. I got to really start Magic with that commander, and I love mono white. So, you can really take advantage of just budget with Odric, and I think those are all excellent picks. Mine are going to be a little more mana intensive,
Yeah,
but
you said 4 to 6. I'm really psyched to see what you pick because I know this is such a personal thing, so I'm really excited to, like, compare, especially since we, like, already know they're gonna be different.
so first up I have Itali Primal Storm. So this is 6 mana for a 6/6, and when it attacks, we get to exile everyone's top library card. And I love to cast free spells, and so I would say 4 out of 5 times I'm gonna get this to happen just with my play group. So,
Mhm.
I'm getting whatever I got, whatever they got. I love to play my opponent's spells as well. So, that's why that's on there, and I love that card.
It's a really powerful pick. Personally, I because I told you I'm a CEDH player, I never wanna seem mean when I play with other people because I don't want them to think that I'm, like, a mean pub stomper player, so I totally stray away from cards like Atali that, like, take people's stuff and stuff like that, and now that I also primarily play online EDH, I really stray away from these kinds of cards, but Atali has such a special place in my heart because it's such an amazingly powerful card, and it's so much fun.
Okay, next up, Pull from Tomorrow. You can draw X cards and then discard 1 card. I love card draw.
Pull is a really great pick. Aggressively costed, instant speed. I absolutely love that card. And actually, you can use that discard to your advantage sometimes, which is fun.
Oh, okay, yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, corner case depending on what kind of deck you're playing. But yeah, like sometimes discarding a card is good.
All right, next up we have Auric Lore Mage. So you get to tutor any card into your graveyard, and if you do happen to get an instant or sorcery, you get a +1/+1 counter on it. But I don't care about that. I just want whatever I want in my graveyard, and that you only have to tap it. It does cost 4 mana, but I think it's an excellent tutor for your graveyard.
This is one that people have pointed out for me a lot of times for the black decks that I like to play. And I wish I played more reanimator strategies because I think this is such an awesome repeatable effect. This is a really good pick.
Okay, and I did have to copy yours a little bit. I did put Soul Ring in there because, like I mentioned earlier, you're getting out that 4 CMC commander, turn 2, very powerful. I don't in my opinion, I don't think it's ban worthy because I think it's, like, the staple for Commander. Not that it was made in Commander, but in my opinion, I don't think it's ban worthy.
No, I think it's like I said, I think we're very fortunate as EDH players to be able to play with because the only other place you can do that is Vintage or at your kitchen table, just playing random 60 card decks. Like, it's a great card. I love to be able to play with it.
Alright, my next one. Have you heard of Shirai Shizo's Caretaker?
I am pretty sure I know what this card is. Read it off, please.
So whenever a creature with power 1 or less is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may return that card to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step, if
Yeah,
Shirai is on the battlefield.
I am very interested in these picks. Can you tell me about the philosophy of your picks? Like, how are you thinking of the Power Nine when you put this together?
So I did some research and so I was like, okay, what makes the Power 9? And it's that they are considered to be the most powerful cards ever printed, or they can change the state of the game, that kind of power.
Hmm.
And so, in my opinion, I think these cards can change my game. For example, going back to Atali, if out of luck, maybe, or even if I somehow have an awesome card that I know it's on top of my library and I'm just going to get everyone else's good stuff on top, I can take advantage of that. Also, with Pull from Tomorrow, I love to draw cards. So whenever you were saying you you thought ramp would be more, or you would choose ramp over card draw, I'm the complete opposite. I love to draw cards so much. I will end up losing the game, and I just enjoy drawing cards. That's the silly part. And I'll have Arik Lore Mage mentioned later, but because I have another card to go with it. This is just excellent for a commander that I'll mention later. And whenever I can start tutoring things into my graveyard, I can really start affecting the game if I'm not getting enough luck with
Hmm.
my card draw. Soul Ring, as I mentioned earlier, very powerful. You just get that 1 mana off of it. And Shirai, I had the privilege to play with Bobby Christine and 2 other guests, and Shirai showed out. Like, this is, in my opinion, the budget commander. It almost, I probably prefer Shirai over Audric, actually. Like, I
Hmm.
think it's that good.
It is extremely powerful, and I'm really glad that you brought up that the changing the game state aspect of it, because I think that all of these hits so hard on the changing the game state aspect of the Power Nine.
So my next one is Abundance.
Oh, good pick.
So it is 4 mana, but, like, you get to go from, "Man, I really need a land right now," or "I really need not a land right now," and just be like, "Okay, Abundance, do your thing," and then you get that thing.
Yeah, that kind of like card selection like that is really nice, and like card selection over card draw, in my opinion. If you can do it like that precisely, that is like extremely good.
Alright, next we have Mentor of the Meek, which a lot of people may not think much of it because you still have to pay mana to draw a card, and you have to have that power 2 or less. But at least for the decks I build, I get to take advantage of Mentor of the Meek and similar cards, but Mentor of the Meek is the budget option for card draw in white for me, so that is a fun pick for me.
And honestly, in comparison to a lot of the more modern white card draw, it doesn't have the once per turn clause on it. So like, I'll gladly pay the mana every time.
Exactly. And then next I have Arami of the Dead Tide. This is the commander I was talking about that can take advantage of creatures in my graveyard, and I give them Encore, and they do get exiled, sadly, but I get, if I have 3 opponents, 3 copies of that creature, which is really sweet. So a lot of ETB, a lot of leave the battlefield effects.
This is a really cool pick. This was a CEDH deck for just a hot second. It didn't quite make the cut over the long term, but I saw it in play a couple of times, and like, yeah, getting the triple ETBs and things like that is so extremely powerful and fun.
I didn't know it was CEDH. That's cool, or at least, for that minute. That's awesome.
Yeah, people would use like entomb effects to put like Spellseeker, I think was one of the main lines that you could do in the deck. Go get 3 different instants and sorceries, and I think you could probably assemble like a Thoracle combo from there somehow.
Cool. Okay. The last one I have is Thieving Amalgam. Do you know that one?
Oh my gosh. If you know Ken Bauman from Stacked EDH, he just whipped my butt with this card this weekend.
I do not, but I this was a recommended one for a Rami, so I had to put it on here as well. You I just feel like this is underrated, honestly.
Absolutely. I never see anyone play it, and this card is just devastating.
Well, it's not good online because there's so many things you have to interact with, but in person, like, it's good either way, but online, it's really messy.
It's definitely messy online, and that's the reason why I haven't played it in my decks. But I was in a 5-player game this weekend with Ken, and he had this on board, and it's even better the more players you have.
Exactly. So that is my Power 9, and, what do you think of it? What are your thoughts?
I love it. I think it's really interesting. I think it's super personal. I love that you went for a different aspect of it with the idea of like what really changes the state of the game. I love that you had that idea instead of my thinking of like what's aggressively costed and powerful. I really enjoy that that difference in thought pattern. I think it's really interesting. I really liked your picks. And I think that they're all spot on for like doing what you said and being really sweet cards.
Now, I think these are all a dollar or less, but I tried to go for that for budget purposes, and I think we both met that category unless Counterspell is, like, $2 for whatever silly reason, but, uh,
It's like $1.50, but yeah, just
yeah,
barely pushing it.
I am very thankful to have this conversation with you because I saw this on Twitter and I was like, "I have to talk to Dan. This looks so cool."
Yeah, this was really fun. I appreciate you inviting me to talk about this, and it was really fun to get to share and compare our lists.
So, if you'd like to have the viewers find you anywhere, where could they do that?
Yeah, if you want to find me, if you want to check out my budget deck list, you can find them on Moxfield under Moderately Anonymous MTG. If you want to find some of my content, I primarily make CDH content on YouTube. Again, Moderately Anonymous MTG. I put out a lot of strategy content and beginner content for CDH. So if you've ever been thinking about getting into the CDH meta, I have a lot of content to help you do that. And if you want to catch some games live, I'm a ton of fun. Barrel of Laughs. Come catch me on Twitch every Wednesday and Saturday at 8 p.m. Twitch.tv/moderately anonymous MTG.
I'll also have all of Dan's links in the description down below, so if you want to check that out, they will all be there. Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you as well.